So I'm going to title this segment, How the Hell Did We Get This Damn Woke? Simple as that. How do we get to a point where we allowed ourselves to be bullied, to be shamed by, to be coerced by these far left radical ideologues? This is me putting it the kindest way I can. I'm doing my best not to use insults for some of our viewing audience out there, but don't think that the pettiness won't slip out every now and then. But how do we get to a place where we had to debate whether or not there was more than male and female? How do we get there? How do we get to a place where we have to debate on whether or not you can take a 3, 5, 7, 10, 12, 15-year-old and essentially mutilate them? How do we get to that place? And so we are going to lean upon a resource of the ages, a man of the times. Again, I will continue to say this. This man is easily one of the greatest intellectuals and truth tellers of our time. More importantly, truth teller. He's a man who has the research. He's done the work, but more importantly, he's willing to say it out loud. And so let's get into the origins of woke with Thomas Sowell, featuring your man's Aquarius Waive. We're going to get into it, and grab yourself something to drink, hopefully a water or tea preferably. I know a lot of my coffee drinkers out there. That's okay. Do your thing. Do your thing. Let's get into it.
All of those who think that third parties ought to be making people's decisions for them. The subtitle is Self-Congratulation as a Basis for Social Policy. In other words, people who think that everything that's wrong with the country is due to the fact that other people are just not as smart as they are. And if only they could, or people like them could take over and make our decisions, we'd be so much better off.
But in early America, didn't this sort of educated class make the decisions for everybody?
As far as governmental decisions,
Yeah.
But the government itself didn't make the decisions for everyone. Now, you can't decide where your kid's going to school. You can't decide whether or not they can move a halfway house for drug users next door to you or whatnot.
It's out of your control. The government decides that
That's right.
stuff.
The government decides too many things. They decide also how your children are to be raised. You may have an idea about at what age children should be introduced to sex, and in what manner, with what kind of moral commitments.
You mean as a parent, you have this...
As a parent, yes. The schools have taken that over. By the time you even think about it, they've already had years, of showing.
They're passing out condoms to these kids.
Passing out condoms is not even the half.
The thing that always blows my mind when I listen to this brother right here is that everything he said is always of the time, which I don't know is a good thing or not, but it's like it seems he's ahead of his time. But I think what he's really actually getting to, or I guess what we witness with this, the way we relate to what he's saying, is the fact that in the 1970s, the very same things were taking place that we now, I guess, have seen at probably the most exaggerated level, right? This woke ideology is nothing more than it's a de-evolution of, let's say, the hippie movement, the women's suffrage or feminist movement, the Black Pride movement, things of that nature, right? A lot of the social activism that took place in the 60s and the early 70s then found its way into the 2020s. And I mean, y'all have seen what I've seen, then you know how crazy we have gotten. So it always blows my mind to think, man, this brother might as well be speaking right now, because 1995 just popped up. That's a year before I was born. So in 1995, this was as prevalent as it is 30 years later. That's incredible.
Not even the half of it. They're showing motion pictures of naked couples engaging in sex, both homosexual and heterosexual, in the 7th grade. And if you complain about it, that's considered to be censorship.
You can't pull your kid out of school and say they don't have to put up with this stuff? I guess you could,
No.
but you'd be...
Well, if you have a private school to put them in, but you have compulsory attendance laws, and if you don't have the money for private schools, then you're stuck.
Where did this country get off the track and decide that the federal government should make most of our decisions?
Well, it started to some extent in the New Deal, but I think the 1960s is sort of the golden age, if you want to put it that way, of this whole mindset. And that's what the book's about. It's about a mindset. It's not about a series of policies, but of showing how in policy after policy, those who think a certain way will try to take over other people's decisions.
How do you characterize the liberal philosophy today from the conservative philosophy?
Oh, that's a tough one. I guess the main thing about the liberals, again, is that they think a program will do it. If there's something that they don't like in the society, you have set up a program and that will solve.
DEI. He might as well be talking to us today. They think that creating this policy or a series of policies is all of a sudden going to fix an innate or an inherent problem, right? So these people who, I don't know, lack the ability to actually be able to do a specific type of job or whatever it may be, or just are not competent, which means they just need to put more work in. If we just made a rule that these people are forced into those positions, then surely that's going to fix the problem. No, what it does is it creates more problems. And it takes away an incentive for people to be excellent, to be better than average, because they're already expecting a handout. Yeah, this brother's preaching.
Solve the problem. I think one of the words they use a lot is solutions. And I argue here and elsewhere that there are no solutions. There are just trade-offs. So, for example, when Ralph Nader launched his attack against the Corvair many years ago, he said it's an unsafe car and it has these safety problems and those safety problems. And in some respects, he was correct, not all. But the fact is, there were other things that a Corvair would do that made it safer than other cars. And on net balance, it was as safe as the rest of them.
Are you saying there are no solutions to our problems as Americans?
There are no solutions to anybody's problems. There are trade-offs. Safety is a classic example. Every year, so many hundreds of thousands of people are vaccinated against measles, smallpox, those kinds of things. Now, this saves several hundred lives, it's estimated. It also causes brain damage to about 30 kids a year. Now, there are no solutions in that. There are just trade-offs.
What about crime? Take crime as an issue. Can we solve the crime issue or fundamentally solve it so it's reduced?
Well, then that's a trade-off. You don't solve it. There will always be crime. There always has been. But you want to keep it down to some level. It's not this astronomical thing we have today. For example, the liberals right now are saying, crime has eased off in New York, and that's true. There were 6 times as much crime in New York a few years ago as there was in 1960. Now it's down to 5 times as much crime as there was in 1960. Now that's not what I regard as a great trend, unless it continues a lot more sharply.
Liberals think we need more education and we need to help people in the inner city more to cut down crime there. Conservatives would say we have to be tougher on crime. Is either of them correct?
No. You see, the conservative view is really not a solution. It's a trade-off. It says, yes, it would be wonderful if we could do all these things to prevent crime in the first place. We just don't.
And this is what I've adopted. I guess hopefully the more I've matured, right? The more I've come to realize that it is a necessity to have the consequences. So when you're in a sense of naivety, you would think to yourself, if we just did more, then there would be less of this. And the more is honestly, it's enforcement, it's incentive. So if you create laws like in California, or at least, before we reversed it in California, where it was a slap on the wrist if you stole less than $950 worth of merchandise, you are incentivizing people to be criminals. People who otherwise would not, because they're afraid of the laws in place, you stop them from the criminality. Whereas when you take that away, what stops those individuals from doing exactly that? Now, the criminals are always going to be criminals, like he's saying, which I wholeheartedly get. Some people have psychopathic or sociopathic, antisocial behaviors, dark tribe, whatever it may be, that, then leads to these sorts of things. And of course, that is rooted in, as much nature or nurture as anything else, right? So we can address some of those things, but it's not going to be, the policy of, just be softer on them, just be easier on them, give them needles, because they're addicts. Like, no, that's giving them more an incentive to do exactly the same thing that's been leading to the detriment of their life that they're now leading, and, the harm that they're causing to other people. So yeah, that has been something that has been, I guess, newer, as far as I become more black and white about that, to say, you need to punish crime, period. Like, there's really no questions about that. The law is the law, right? The law is the law. Now, sometimes we can over punish, or sometimes we can, oftentimes nowadays we underdo it, but the law is still the law. And there's a reason for these consequences, is to keep things in checks and balance, keep things in order. Yes, you may end up having somebody who is incarcerated, locked up, and institutionalized. But the other alternative, as he's saying, the trade-off is they're just in the streets. So it's curious how all of this is getting into woke, because we think of the woke ideology, at least for me, just it's like almost like a caricature of itself now, right? It's like the purple, blue hair, multiple piercings everywhere, like there's this deranged look in the eyes, the flag t-shirts, and the whatever damn poster they got up that week, depending on the cause that they're fighting for on that day. You know what I mean? Like that's usually what we see, but it's much darker, much more sinister behind the scenes. That's why I've made countless videos just speaking on this subject, because I believe it is, if not the one of the greatest detriments to our current social environment. Like when we look at the world, what are the biggest problems we have? Oh, it's climate, it's this, oh, it's no, it's the woke ideology, because it allows for all of these things to continue to proliferate. It is anti-capitalistic, it is anti-free market, it is pro-social or socialism or pro-communism, which are, they're Siamese twins, to say the least. They incentivize these things, they promote these things, they have a us versus them mentality baked into it. There's resentment, there's envy, there's a power grab. All these things are a part of this ideology. And so it's interesting to hear that at the root of it, again, it comes down to, these baseline beliefs of we have to save these type of people. And the way we save them and be the virtuous, because that's why we want to save them. We're so virtuous. We're so, high and mighty. We can save these people by just forcing other people, in essence, to accept a more dangerous outcome. We take away the criminality because we're saving the criminal, and then everybody else is now in danger. Like I used to say, sanctuary cities were a sanctuary for criminals. That's what it's a sanctuary for. And it's the most dangerous place for a person who is a law-abiding citizen.
Happen to be that smart. And so what we do, we put people behind bars who commit violent crimes. Now, a few years ago in East Palo Alto, which is not far from Stanford University, a minority community, low income, they had the doubtful distinction of being the murder capital of the United States in proportion to their population. The next year, murder and all sorts of other violent crimes dropped tremendous amount, 30, 40, 50% in 1 year. Now, that wasn't because they discovered the root causes of crime or because they worked out everything that was wonderful. They launched a campaign that put a lot of the bad guys behind bars. And when they were behind bars, they didn't commit as many crimes.
Makes sense to me.
And the thing that it's marvelous, even in a high crime area, the great majority of the people are not criminals. And so if you can just put your hands on those people who are raising all the hell in the community and take them out of circulation, the crime rate drops.
People say there's undue emphasis on African Americans for committing crimes. Is that true? Ed Koch wrote in a column here that the population is 25% African American in New York. 62% of the crimes are committed by African Americans. Is that and he says
I haven't checked these figures, but throughout the world, this is not unusual. Throughout the world, people are disproportionately represented in all kinds of different things. And it's true, obviously, in basketball. It's true in all kinds of other things. The main thing is not to keep people out of jail because they're one race or another, because when you do that, the people who are going to suffer the most will be the black community.
Where are you on affirmative action?
Against.
Why?
Well, you can only do one of two things. You can either just judge people individually, or you can judge them by groups. This whole notion that you're going to come out with a compromise, I would defy anybody to come out with a compromise.
And today's argument, the DEI argument, has simply become, merit versus identity. Right. And it's not even true identity. Like when we talk about identity, we're really talking about the most superficial parts of an identity. It's not your thought process, your belief system necessarily, but instead what you look like first and foremost. Right. Okay. You are black, you are female, you are, a transformer, whatever it is. Right. All of these aspects then make you, worthy of the role, as opposed to merit, which is you're actually good for the job or good for the position. And, I know there's a lot of argument when it comes to, well, there's so many unqualified people, white people, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of unqualified everything. But those people in any good company will weed themselves out. That's why Elon steps into a company like Twitter and essentially etch-a-sketches out 80% of that population. A lot of them left because they didn't want the free speech thing happening. God forbid you have free speech on a public platform. But 80% of the staff gone, and the app got significantly better. The top 20 stayed because they were the ones who were actually doing the productive thing. Everybody else is pretty much wasting space and time and sucking up, the good air in essence. So yeah, that brother, again, this brother is always preaching. Simple as that.
So that you're going to do one of those two things. Now you can pretend to be doing other things, but that's all you're going to do. Those are the only two choices you really have in the end. Again, the people who are the anointed think of this as a symbolic issue, and they want to be on the side of the angels. They don't ask, what are the consequences? Now, I've studied affirmative action programs around the world. One of the consequences is that those people who are more fortunate in the group that has the preferences, those people take the lion's share of the preferences. Very often, those at the other end of the scale, the poorer people, actually fall further behind. That's true of blacks here. It's true of Malays in Malaysia. It's true of various groups in India. And there are reasons for that. You can say you must have certain proportion. Nothing is easier than for an employer who might otherwise locate, let's say, in the Bronx, to locate out in Provo, Utah, where he will be not near any black people, and therefore he will never have lawsuits, and the jobs will be in Provo, and people will wonder, why don't people, here have more jobs?
That's a powerful point. When you force somebody to have to fill these quotas, etc., it does disincentivize you, because I want to be able to just get the best of the best, but instead I'm forced to just take somebody because of, right? It's like, okay, we have a room of 100 people. We need this many of that and that many of this and this many of that. Instead of just saying, I want the best 100 people who are going to add the most to the room. It's like these markers of what is best is their color. Huh? That's it. Yeah, their gender. How about, maybe what they're capable of? No. Their color, their gender, or the lack thereof, their cultural affiliations, their sexual preferences. Ridiculous.
It never seems to occur to liberals that other people are not blocks of wood, that when you set up certain incentives, they will react to them in certain ways. And when they do that, the result may be the opposite of what you set out to do.
How do the anointed refer to people they don't agree with?
All sorts of ways, but I think the main thing is they believe that you're not merely in error, but in sin. In other words, they can't believe that you're just mistaken. You must have sold out. You must be something warped about you.
You guys are for the rich. You guys only care about the rich guys. Answer that. How do you respond? Liberal says conservatives only care about rich people.
Well, one of the things I go into in the book is that the whole notion of rich is ridiculous. That most Americans don't stay in the same income bracket, even for one decade. So the same guy who is, quote, rich now was 20 years ago probably in the bottom 20%. I mean, I was on a cruise recently, luxury cruise, and the guy said, if someone had told me when I was growing up that I would end up on a cruise like this, I would have said, get real, man. That very few people are in that same income bracket the whole time. Right. The genuinely rich and the genuinely poor, I would estimate to be no more than 3% of the American people.
Really?
Put together.
Really?
Yes.
Genuinely poor. Now, I'm seeing numbers like, when they were talking about health care, they said, 30 million people couldn't afford it or something?
Several million of those were making more than $50,000 a year. So it's not, see, this is one of the things the anointed do. They never believe that people make choices. There are people who have the money, they prefer to put that money into a BMW.
Yep, oh my God. This one offends everybody on every side of the aisle, but it has to be talked about. This message has stuck with me for months now. I got a comment from a brother who is a garbage collector. And he said, and this was on a video about, taking personal accountability over finances, etc., and how we learn to overspend and not to invest and to see money as something that's just essentially to come in and go out, right? And though, yes, the economy has, due to Bidenomics and things of that nature has pretty much been in the tank, etc., it is always possible to create wealth in any environment. I know that sounds crazy to most people, right? But you go ask some folks, some people thrived in 2008 even. Some people thrived, throughout the throughout the Jabsky season. Many people, thrived, or not many, but there were some who thrived throughout the Great Depression and even created businesses in the midst of that. It was just the idea, the mentality of these people. What do they believe about themselves, about the world, etc.? But point I'm getting to is this. There's a comment left on that video where the brother says, getting to see through people's trash all the time, he was essentially astounded to find out that most people have so much to spend. Like most people, even in poorer neighborhoods, quote unquote, people are spending money. People are spending money. And I'm not talking about just necessities, etc. There are things that we are buying on a day-to-day basis that are going below our conscious awareness that we essentially don't account for. Things that we don't actually need that, but we end up getting that and a little bit of this. And so I despise how the conversation of money is always talked about. Like, it's like, oh, there's this victim class and these people who just simply don't have, an opportunity to make any money. No, we all in this first world experience can create a significant amount of wealth for ourselves if we're willing to do what it takes. Not just the hard work, but also to learn how money works. You know what I mean? Like me, I work hard, but I also work smart. I work diligently. I set myself, schedules, times, things of that nature. I build content as an asset. Like a video like this is going to, make me money, not just today, but continuously throughout time. Like these are realities, and this is what I love to do. It's my passion. I would do it regardless. I was doing it for a whole year before making a single dime off of it. But nevertheless, I still understand that if I use my gift to the highest ability and I put myself out there, etc., then I am able to create a level of wealth for myself and my family. And if I'm able to, me and wifey sat down, we went through the entire budget not too long ago, a few days ago, and, made a promise to ourselves to say we will continue to keep these same habits week in, week out, just once a week to touch bases with all the, now I'm a little more extreme when it comes to those things, but, we will at least sit together and go over these finances. What is it that we're actually needing? What is it that we're actually doing, et cetera? Take personal accountability instead of blaming. Oh, it was my job. It was the 401k. Social Security was enough, et cetera. Not even understanding what that means. We just trust everybody with our things, and then we blame them with those very same things. Nobody's ever going to care about your money more than you, your overall life than you, your health. Your doctor's responsibility is not to be healthy for you. It's not. And when you're now coming to them because you're in dire straits, it's likely because the decisions that were made were not necessarily the best decisions, right? You go in there and now you have type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetic, and, you can try to blame the world, but the doctor didn't shove the sugar into your mouth. You may even say, well, big farm or big food, big ag, whatever did it. And the truth is, you may have been convinced, influenced, marketed to, but you still made decisions. Those are still personal decisions. This isn't an easy truth to accept, but once you accept it, you feel the empowerment that comes from it, the genuine power that comes from knowing, oh, I have agency over my decisions. I can choose to do certain things and other things not to do. The reason why I'm in the physical shape that I'm in right now is because I made certain decisions. I made decisions to take care of my body. I made decisions to, not eat the foods that are not going to be conducive, to eat the carb, like cut out the carbs, cut out the sugars, right? To make sure that I'm staying active at a certain level, to make sure, I'm putting up heavy things and putting heavy things down. Like these are decisions that I'm making to rid my life of as much stress and chaos as possible. Oh, but I got these stressful people. Oh, my cousin, my this. You got to start making the hard decisions to cut, snip away at those relationships. If they're so valuable to you, then I have to ask, why is a toxic relationship valuable to me? I might have to have a hard conversation with these people that I'm engaging with. These are personal decisions we have to make. And that's what I'm really getting away from this more than anything else. My intention is obviously, to bring awareness to this woke ideology. But the overarching theme for me, my entire message, my platform is built upon personal accountability, to take ownership of your life. Nobody is supposed to learn how to be in relationship for you. Nobody is supposed to, take care of your money better than you do. Even an accountant, at a certain point, I want to have, a large media organization, a large media machine, and we're going to have accountants, lawyers, and, tax accountants specifically. But I'm not going to depend on that person beyond myself. I got to look at reports. I got to go through numbers. I got to take a certain level of responsibility, even if I delegate those things, to make sure that they're taken care of. You know, that's one thing you learn as an entrepreneur. I ran a small little marketing business for 7 years, or about 7 years. And something that I learned in that time was, when you delegate whatever and somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, it's my fault. I needed to be there step by step. I needed to teach it better. I needed to do something different to get a different result, instead of just blaming. And we're so used to blaming. That's that far left mentality. It's like, woe is me, I'm a victim. You know, if it wasn't for my mama, my daddy, my this, the society, the government, the blah, 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 blah. Like, I was not a fan of the Biden administration whatsoever, but I wasn't going to stop them from, like, my initial boost in growth came from, or within that administration. I said, I don't give a damn who's in office right now. I'm going to make sure I make things work for me and mine. And I'm going to obviously take advantage of, the thriving economies, but damn, I'm going to create my own economy. To hell with that. Oh, but you're black and racism, man, to hell with that. To hell with that. I honestly don't care. I don't. If people are genuinely racist, they don't want to see me, I don't care. It is not powerful enough to stop a man who is devoted to a mission. Simple. And I hope the same for you. So anyway, let me go ahead and get this cat from outside. It's a new addition to my family right now. So let me go ahead and get this kitty cat to come in here, because it's freezing out there, and I know what time it is. Appreciate y'all. Till the next time. Peace.
Rather than
a lot of young people didn't want health care. They were betting on their health.
Absolutely. And then this allows them to buy more stuff they want to buy. So it's not a question that they couldn't afford it. It's a question they don't choose to spend the money.
What about mean-spirited? Conservatives are mean-spirited. They're bigots. They don't like people.
Well, one of the things I tell people say, you're a very tough person. I'm not tough. Life is tough. I'm merely trying to acquaint you with those facts.
Back in the 60s, Lyndon Johnson announced a war on poverty. Am I wrong? But there are more poor people. I mean, in other words,
today than there were then, yes.
Yeah, there are more poor people.
Yes.
I mean, this was a hell of a war. We lost it, apparently, because for the last 30 years, we've been dumping money into these poverty programs.
Oh, absolutely.
Where's the money go?
Oh, it supports a whole industry of people who run those programs, who talk about those programs, research those programs, bureaucrats, and so on.
Doesn't help poor people.
No. The tragedy, you see, is that the anointed really want to make symbolic statements. And running these programs makes those symbolic statements. They don't really care if in the wake of affirmative action, for example, companies start locating away from minority communities so they don't even get involved in legal action. They don't care about that. They've made their statement on the side of the angels, and that's what's important.
Have you ever debated Jesse Jackson?
No, I haven't.
Is that because, would you like to, or would he not want to do that?
I have no idea.
You'd be willing to, I assume.
Oh, maybe. I don't know.
You think that's too much showbiz?
It is. There are people who go and do this, and I'm doing less and less of it. And I tell them the story of an African boxing champion who fought an Irishman in St. Patrick's Day in Dublin. And he lost his title on what the sports writers called a questionable decision.
Yes.
And so you have to know what forum you're talking about.
Right.
I saw Shelby Steele on with him, and I said, if Jesse Jackson and Shelby Steele each had to present a 2-hour lecture to an audience with an average IQ of 120, Shelby would wipe him out. But if they had 5 seconds each on Donahue, it would be Jesse Jackson all the way.
Right.
So everything depends upon the forum.
Is Jesse Jackson good for African Americans or not?
He's not. Good for himself.
Good for himself.
And that's true of most ethnic leaders in most groups, in most countries, in most periods of history. That what will serve his interest is to keep people paranoid, dependent upon him, dependent upon government. What will serve their interest is typically just the opposite.
That's pretty interesting. So you're saying that the leaders, whatever group, leader, wants the people to be poor and dependent on them as opposed to dependent on themselves.
Oh, absolutely. And you see this in the greatest cynicism in the academic world, where in many places, black organizations on campus have a say on who gets admitted. And they have turned down blacks with excellent credentials, both as students and as faculty members, for that very reason.
Who are the mascots of the anointed? You talk about the mascots of the anointed.
They're people whom they choose to back and whose rights are supposed to override other people's rights. The homeless are a classic example. I'm appalled when I see people out there in the street giving money to the home. I mean, able-bodied men. I think one of the classic pictures to me was in San Francisco, when there was this able-bodied white man out in the street begging, and there's this black lady coming along there, very modestly dressed, like she didn't have, but she's stopping to open her purse to give him some money, you know. And I thought, good heavens, have we really come to this? And we've been brainwashed by the anointed into thinking this is what we ought to do.
What do you say to guys who bum money off of you?
Not all of it can be repeated on the air, but the fact is they don't get any money.
They don't.
And people who complain now about all these people begging in the street, there's a simple answer. Don't give them money, and they won't be in the street.
When you wrote this, what were you trying to accomplish with the book, and did you do it? Were you nailing liberals for 30 years of social policy? What were you trying to say?
I was trying to reveal the thinking behind that, the kinds of assumptions, the kind of world that exists inside their mind, and therefore why those assumptions are so dangerous in the long run. It's not just the policies mentioned in that
They
book.
think they're better than everybody else.
Oh, absolutely. There's no question. And that's what makes them dangerous. Even all the policies that are mentioned there, 20 years from now, those policies may not be the policies we're concerned about. But that mindset will still be there. And what makes them tremendously dangerous is that facts that contradict what they believe are simply ignored or evaded.
Where does the press fall into this as the anointed group? Are they part of the anointed?
Oh, absolutely. They're a major part of it, because one of the reasons that people don't get many of the facts that go against what's believed is that the press doesn't choose to publicize those facts.
Give me an example of something the press might not cover or cover well.
Oh, a few years ago, there was a story about prenatal care among blacks, that black women get less prenatal care than white women. Infant mortality rate is higher among blacks. They immediately assume that one causes the other. Now, one of the things I like to do is go back to the original source and find out what it said. I went back. On the very same page where it said that, the figures showed Mexican Americans get even less prenatal care than blacks, and they have a lower infant mortality rate than whites. So prenatal care and infant mortality rate have nothing to do with each other. If you break it down further, black women who have only a high school education, but who are married, their children have lower infant mortality rates than white women who have a college education, who are unwed mothers. So it's not race, it's not income, it's not education, it's lifestyle. When you live a certain way, there are consequences to that. The media doesn't want to accept that. Because if you say people's lifestyles have a lot to do with the outcome, then there's no room for the anointed.
I used to be afraid of the dark, place unknown like a heart in their heart. I used to see my life in the bar, now the kids unchained, every shackle is lost. 2 steps in the moonlight, 2-step in the daytime. You just know when it feel right, you got a feeling the time's not. See you through those shades that I just threw on. Through my lenses, you just can't do no wrong. I fell in love with myself again. I fell in love with myself. I fell in love with the sunshine. I fell in love with the light. I fell in love with the full moon. I fell in love with the night. I can see the light again. I can see the light. You can see the life in him illuminate the night. I know the time is taking. A 3-6-5, that's a full rotation. I see you looking up, you know them constellations. Constantly gazing like house of praises, you get to praising. They see your light shine, that's